Here we go. After this, you will have all the pieces you need to write your rhetorical analysis. So the objectives for this video is to talk about intros and conclusions, and specifically that you need to focus on your audience. What do they need? And so your audience for this piece, like for all of the pieces, is UAB students. The audience is UAB students. Subject verb agreement. Who cares? The audience is going to be your fellow students in this class and just general students at UAB. So someone who is relatively young and they are working on a pre-professional degree. So we're also going to look back at what the zoom in method of writing introduction. You can tell that I'm getting a little loosey-goosey at the end of the summer. I'm kind of like losing steam, as I'm sure you all are. And then we're going to understand the zoom out method of writing a conclusion. So the structure of a conclusion, I'm just going to go ahead and put it up top. You can break this structure. This is just a suggestion because a lot of students really get worried. They're like, those are my cats. How am I going to do this? Writing does not have to be formulaic, but here's a decent kind of idea for keeping yourself on track. You want to restate your main point in a slightly different way, but a huge mistake is making the conclusion just say what you already said. I think that's boring. It doesn't add anything at all. They've already read it. They've seen the thesis statement. So maybe you recap it for 1 or 2 sentences. But after that, a conclusion should help the reader actually see why what you just talked about and wrote about is interesting or important or helps them think about something larger in their life. So it takes this small thing that you've talked about and it zooms out to something bigger than the topic of the essay itself. And it helps explain why the point of your essay matters to your audience. So let's take a look at this. Your introduction should get really specific soon about what you're talking about. I don't want to hear, since the dawn of time, music has always been important, or communication is the utmost importance for all the things. I need you to talk about the specific thing we're talking about. So that might be whatever your thesis statement is really going on about. I'm sorry, do you want to see my cats just like doing crazy stuff? So yes, I'll get to an example soon. Your body paragraphs are going to explain point by point in detail so that you really get the idea, but then your conclusion should zoom out so that we can make sense of why we just read all of this. Okay, so what does it really mean to zoom out? You can ask, well, what it means is to answer any of the following questions. Why is what you just talked about important? What's the bigger picture? What does this mean for the future? That might be a question you can answer. So whenever we talk about the way that we interpret this music video and the way you notice something in a music video, how can that help you think about future videos or future interactions with media from an artist? Or maybe you draw some conclusions about Janet Jackson herself. How can that help us think about like pop culture figures going forward? Maybe your conclusion answers the question, how does this relate to other kinds of issues or other media that you've watched or other arguments? So is there some feature of this music video that other artists are using? What does this say about the importance of a certain kind of visual or a certain kind of camera work in media? Or maybe this talks about similar political or social situations. Maybe we want to apply what we learn or like what we analyze regarding apartheid to something happening in our current political or social landscape. And then maybe you also answer, do you have any recommendations or hopes? So after you've walked the readers through all of the things that you've talked about, you want to say, is there something that you want the readers to really remember and carry forward to other contexts? What might be useful to take from this analysis to go into other analyses of media that they might do in the future? So I'm going to use an example of an introduction that zooms in and a conclusion that zooms out. And I'm going to talk about this music video that I really like. It's one of my favorite music videos from the past 10 years. It's 21 Savage's A Lot, and he won a Grammy for the actual song. And it was from 2018, and it's just a great music video. And it depicts this family who is gathering for a big meal, maybe like a Thanksgiving meal. And they're all it's quite opulent. They're at this very richly decorated house with lots of like very rich foods. And when you go by each of their faces, it flashes into another part of their life where they're experiencing really, really difficult circumstances. Being involved in poverty and in gun violence and in some sort of drug trafficking situations. None of them are having a good time. But it keeps popping back to this like very beautiful, sumptuous meal that they're having and having a joyful time. So I'm going to remind us that an introduction should always relate to the audience. Who's your audience? Fellow UAB students. And then it needs to help us set the stage. So setting the stage meaning we're going to make sure that the audience knows we're about to talk about a certain music video, and we're going to talk about certain themes that have to do with the thesis that you've written. And then, of course, it ends with a thesis. So I'm going to read you an example, which, again, you're welcome to use as an exemplar, maybe when you're prompting Gen AI, maybe when you are just working with it for yourself. So even if we're not all from the Southeast, we find ourselves here in this very specific place at a time in our lives where we have big dreams for what we will become. You're addressing your UAB student audience. We might call it the American dream, but our specific place in America definitely affects the dreams that are available to us and what it takes to achieve them. Atlanta, Georgia is the setting for 21 Savage and Aysel Sultan's music video A Lot, where we get a glimpse into the dreams, or is it the reality, of one family gathered for a meal. So let me pause really quickly. I related to my audience by talking about like what my thesis is going to be about, being in the South, having dreams, talking about UAB. Then I zoomed in so fast because I immediately started talking about the music video in question. Then I'm moving on to build a little bit more context before I hit them with the thesis. Over the course of the video, we see what looks like the high highs and the low lows that they deal with. At every turn, a beautiful and hopeful image is replaced by a painful one. Even though we want to luxuriate in this nice house, the good clothes and the delicious looking food and moments that seem truly joyful, viewers just can't help but feel sad and conflicted throughout this video. So here's my thesis that I'm going to use elements from the music video to interpret and then to use context to support. A Lot uses these visual contrasts, both what we see and how we see it, to show us that any triumph we have in our lives in Southeast America comes at the price of real suffering. So that's like, we could go into the rest of that, and I have a whole essay that I could share with you, but that's the introduction. Now, how are we going to conclude this essay? So, well, actually, before we do that, I suggest that you pause right now, since here you are, you have to write this eventually. Go ahead and pause and brainstorm how you might introduce your rhetorical analysis about Got Till It's Gone to an audience of fellow college students who have not seen the video. But you want to connect the way you're going to introduce it to something about the interpretation. Like, what is your interpretation actually about? Get them thinking about that. Make it relate to them. So how will you relate this video to them right now, and how will you create a connection between the audience and this material? So remember that when you're free writing, you don't have to write in complete sentences. You can write generatively, which just means that you might start a sentence, maybe not complete it. You might literally say, I'm thinking that, and then you just write words. Like, it doesn't have to be fully formed. So take a moment to pause to do some free writing about your introduction. Okay, and now let's talk about the conclusion. So we talked about zooming out, and we said a good conclusion is going to not just restate, it will restate quickly what you said, but then it's going to say, well, how does this matter? And it might answer those three questions. So I'm going to show you how you could write a different conclusion for this. You could write 40 different conclusions for any essay, whichever one just occurs to you or whichever one you like. So if this is my major point, my thesis, A Lot uses visual contrast. So in the essay, I talk about light and dark. I talk about juxtapositions. I talk about all kinds of things. To show the triumph we have in our lives in Southeast America comes at the price of suffering. So remember, we're answering one of a couple of questions that mainly talk about why is this important. So what's the bigger picture? Well, one way we might say is that even though I'm talking about just the 21 Savage music video, this actually presents us with the reality of the American dream. So, right, we hear this kind of fiction about the American dream. You can achieve whatever you want. But here's the thing, even if you achieve your dreams, it's not like there aren't other people around you who are suffering, maybe even in your own family. So this video shows us how this might pertain to like any possible context in which people get some kind of success. We can't fool ourselves about this and blindly pursue this dream without realizing what it will mean for us or what possibilities are for the kinds of dreams we want. Okay, maybe I write a conclusion that talks about what does watching this and analyzing this and concluding this mean for the future. Maybe I say, okay, here's what I've learned about this music video, and if you, reader, pay attention to the contrasts, like visual contrasts or contradictions in your own life, that's going to be helpful for you, because we do need to celebrate those good moments. We need to be grateful for, you know, the riches that we have. However, we should also pay attention to the fact that some benefit in one area of our life might have a harm attached to it, and maybe we need to think about whether that benefit is worth it. Maybe our benefits come at the expense of others. Maybe this video can help us be more sensitive to that, and maybe not be so judgmental to people who are struggling. So what about relating this to other pieces of media? Has anybody seen the movie Us? It's a Jordan Peele movie, and it's kind of a horror film, and it depicts this kind of normal family. They're like upper middle class, and they're on a vacation, and they are terrorized by a doppelganger version of themselves that come from a kind of netherworld region. And basically, I find myself making a connection between the 21 Savage music video and this movie, because it makes me realize that, like, you have some people who are benefiting, but there's a version of somebody who's being harmed, and is that person you yourself? And so I wrote, you could write a conclusion that talks about how it relates to other media. You might say, Jordan Peele's movie Us does this contrast thing too. It doubles up a family, one of which is successful and middle class, and one of which is a wild, suffering, murderous maniac group from an opposite realm. This doesn't highlight the Southeast thing, but it does notice the role America plays in the benefit-harm thing. It also uses contrasts. Maybe this video fits in within a larger trend of highlighting the way that benefits and harms go hand in hand. By the way, this is not like a fully formed, these are just ideas that I have for conclusion. So I would write it out a little bit more in complete sentences, but this is just a way to show you the different things you might do with your conclusion. And then finally, do I have any recommendations or hopes? I could write a conclusion about recommendations or hopes. Maybe I say the video sheds light on the reality that maybe we need to rethink how we judge people or families when they are trying to pursue their dreams within an unjust society. Things like violence, drug addiction, incarceration are built into the experience of some families in a seemingly inescapable way. Is blame the right avenue? So maybe readers of this might see that this is something that you notice embedded within this media to highlight the fact that if you're doing well, you might also have a different part of your life where things are suffering. So to finish out, free write. I want you to brainstorm different ways you could conclude your essay. Remember, your conclusion only needs to answer one of the questions. What does this mean for the future? How does this relate to other media? What recommendations or hopes you have? Or more broadly, why is any of this important? There are lots of different options you can take, but it should at least answer one of those. So take a moment to free write about that, and good luck with finishing up your draft this week.